Hello, this is Jenny Clark with Solvability, and today in our What's Up with Mitch series, we're going to talk a little bit about systems changeover, systems conversions, whatever you have to go through when it's time to upgrade things. And mainly I'm talking about your accounting, finance, payroll, timesheets, billing, program management, all of those types of systems at once. So Mitch just called and we talked about what he's got to go through, and he's saying, how many months do we have to run parallel? I'm like, run parallel? What do you mean run parallel? So we start talking about it, and he said, well, I've talked to other companies, and they're running 3 months parallel, 6 months parallel, 12 months parallel. It's like, oh my gosh, I can't imagine trying to do that. There's got to be a different way to do that. Running it parallel, you've already got your people overloaded in a system that's not working, and you want to run parallel to those set of numbers. What we want to do is create a testing process, create test by module, make sure the results are the same, and then we cut over on a specific date and go forward from there. So let's talk about just what's involved with that. Mitch, he's a bottom line kind of guy. His main thing is he says, Jenny, I just want it all to work. And here's what he's looking for. Here's the questions he's asked me specifically. How are we supposed to run our regular system plus the new system, knowing how overloaded we are? Great question. Why don't the numbers match, and who do we have to help reconcile it? Ooh. Why isn't there a checklist so we know the next steps and can plan for it? Answer is probably because every company is a little bit different. Why are we so behind schedule? It's because you started with this massive list and you had to start someplace, and it's hard to project. Should we have done this at the end of the fiscal year? There's never a good time to switch systems. So let's just go through those one by one. As far as how are we supposed to run our regular system plus the new system, knowing how overloaded we are? That is a big question. And what you probably want to do is identify what sequence you have to be testing the modules and how you're going to do it. And let me give you some examples. You're getting ready to set up a new timesheet system, and at the same time, you're switching payroll systems. Your number one priority is make sure people get paid correctly and on time. So would I worry about that before I'd worry about the billing? I would have to in a way. But the problem is, if I set up all my employees and get them perfect, but I can't turn on the other part of the system, I can't go live on my new employee records, I'm going to run into all kinds of issues because I've got to keep both systems going with pay rate changes and new hires and all that other stuff. Ooh, that's going to be tough. You've got to be thinking about all of these systems in a way in sequence and identify ways that you can bring it up all at once, test it, and say, okay, are we ready to go live? And you could test it with groups of transactions or smaller ones just to make sure that the transaction went all the way through the system and had the result that you expected. That doesn't mean you need to do 100% of the transactions. That's just too much trouble. And what happens is you get bogged down in it, and then you start getting behind on your current system, and you're just behind her all the time. It's stifling. So the next question is, why don't the numbers match, and who do we have to reconcile it? Okay, so why don't the numbers match? A lot of times with these, when you do a systems upgrade, the method by which you key things in could be different. You might be coding things in a different way. You might be having to, instead of just identify an account you're charging it to and the contract you're charging it to, you may have to be identifying it all the way down to a lower level because of the way the bills need to roll up or summarize. So it can be really difficult to identify through the two systems. Sometimes you'll have in the old system, people got paid their travel reimbursements through payroll, and in the new systems, it just drops a EFT once they've submitted their expense report. So those are things that are hard to identify because you've got to have the transaction finish in the old system so that you can test it in the new system. What I've also worked with people on are just some ideas of doing something that I call reverse parallel. Go back to last month, grab some transactions that are already finished, run them in the new system, see if you get the same result. That way you're not having to wait for one process to end in order to test it. And then you can print out some bills. You can see where everything's going to go. But really creating a test that makes sure everything is working is what you're looking for. The other thing is make backups. When you make your backup just before you're getting ready to test a major thing, then run a posting process, see if it worked, and if it doesn't, restore your backup. Or I would call it not even a backup, I would call it a test database. Why isn't there a checklist so we know the next steps and can plan for it? Now, this is really a tricky question. It's definitely you want to expect to have something like that, but when you're doing the system testing and the training with employees, a lot of times you're trying to do something so they can both understand it and do the work at the same time. And because they've never touched it, first you have to train them on it, and then you've got to figure out, okay, how do I make them feel comfortable with that system? So a checklist can be very helpful, but what you're also asking is not only do you want your system working, but you want custom documentation on the step-by-step process, which will take time, can cost money. But how are you going to do it without that? So it's a real catch-22 on where you want to go and how you want to do it. And certainly the reluctance with your software vendors is you're paying for an implementation specialist. They're supposed to do the setup. They're not supposed to do the running, but they have to show the people how to run it, and frequently they don't have good instructions for it. It's very frustrating. Next question is, why are we so behind schedule? What you really have to do sometimes is take a look and say, are we going to catch up to this? Because maybe unknowingly we got sent down a path where it turns out we're trying to run parallel and we didn't really realize that's what we're doing, and now we're trying to keep up in the new system with where we are in the old system. It's just kind of crazy. And so I've even had it where we'll stop and take a look and say, well, what do we really need? Can we just clear the transactions in the new system and say, okay, we're starting clean on the on a date 6 weeks from now? And that way you're better able to prepare, because you've got to be able to prove that the new system works, but at the same time you need to have a hard cutover date and not have it be nebulous, because that will be really dangerous. The last thing is, should we have done this at the end of the fiscal year? There's never a good time to change systems. Yes, it is my preference to try to set things up so that it's fully ready and testing, so we could go in January, the beginning of your fiscal year, if that's what it is. But what happens is, if we try to do that, what happens is, if you don't have it up and running by Halloween, because of the holidays and all the other stuff that has to be done at the end of the year, including reviews and bonuses and preparing for your accountant, getting the year-end billings right, making sure your rates are right as you go through December, all of those things take up so much extra energy in November and December, not to mention Thanksgiving, the day after Thanksgiving, holidays, and all of that other scheduling. People aren't around to make the decisions. It's not that they're not around, it's that they're just, doing the absolute minimum they can to keep up with work and keep up with everything else they have to do at the end of the year. So if you are going to try to do this for the end of the fiscal year, to me that means your systems decision needs to be starting in July and August. So you've got September, October to do your setup and testing, with the idea that you want it all set up. It's okay. You might be playing around with it. You might be training on it or whatever, but you'd want to have it set up so that you'd start clean in January on the new system, knowing that all your employees are in, all your customer records are in, all of your vendor records are in, and you're ready to start processing. You're still going to have what we call the cutover process, where you take the trial balance from your prior year, you're going to take your billing cumulatives, things like that, and move them over. The other thing that comes into play with this is also, is the system a payroll system, or what is it? And timing can be really important. So when Mitch says he wants it all to work, yeah, that's a lot of discussion and planning that needs to happen in order to make it work. But what I love about Mitch is unstoppable. Are you? You know where you want to go. Solvability can help you get there with the cost and pricing intelligence you need to accelerate and scale your business. Most of our clients get started with our free wrap rate calculator. That's a spreadsheet that I explain and describe that has overhead and G&A rates and profit or fee that you can change around and see what the results are. So you can understand, if I pay the employee this, how much can that employee be billed out at? Or the flip side, I know my bill rate's this. I divide by the wrap rate or the multiplier to decide what the maximum amount I could pay that employee is and still maintain my profit. So to get that, you can go to our website, solvability.com. That's S as in Sam, OLV as in Victor, the word ability.com. Or if you got something urgent and you're looking at some more advanced services, please send me a text. Text me at 256-882-6276, and we'll set up a time that we can talk.